flats is just described in.
They can chainsaw through.
Yeah.
Question: whatever happened to making Mexico pay for it? Wasn't that?
Oh yeah. So well, that's gone through 2 iterations, right? The 2 iterations were.
And they're gonna pay us back, something like that.
First one was they're going to pay us. Then it became we find a really good trade deal with them, and so they were going to pay it indirectly through these like enhanced economic activity. But it turns out that that trade deal hasn't even been passed yet, so you can't really use that argument to do it. So now it's. I don't think we're talking. No one's bringing that up anymore. So now it seems to be one of. I guess we're going to pay for it. Well, we are going to pay. All of us are going to pay for it. But that's not the big news. So the big news this week would be a very small story that came out. I don't even think it really much hit the. It was buried in the Wall Street Journal. It was certainly wouldn't be in anything like the Honolulu Star Advertiser, but it was that auto loans that were more than 90 days late in repayment, that's reached a record high level. So, auto loans. Why should we care about that some single loan product? It turns out to be an incredibly important loan product because when you think about what people choose to not pay, now I say this as a guy who, as a state employee, you get paid on the 5th and the 20th. Anyone want to take a guess of what I have in my bank account right now? I know exactly how much I have in my checking account. Let's not count the $5 they make you have in savings. You can't count that because I can't take it out.
Millions.
6 days left.
You had 6 days left.
About 200 bucks.
$32.71. That's $32.71. Now, most of my bills are paid that have to be paid up until the 20th, so I'm all good. The next thing that comes out, I think, comes out on the 23rd, so I'm all good until then.
So you just gotta get by with $32.
And 71 cents, yes. $32.71. I can do it.
Just that's a tank of gas, and you should be good.
No, it's like it's almost 2 tanks of gas. I just have to make it till next week. I mean, right? It's close.
5 days, and it's what, Wednesday?
What's the 20th? What day of the week is that?
Tuesday or Wednesday? Next week, Wednesday.
See, sometimes it's really good because if it's a Sunday, you get paid. I don't know, if it's a Saturday, you get paid on a Friday.
Depends, sometimes.
I once taught at this place where you got paid only once a month.
So
and you only got paid for the actual academic months of the year. So you'd get this big fat paycheck once a month, and then you'd have to live the whole summer like on nothing, or you would have to live the whole month. Don't say it, one of you, where you're just like, well, why don't you just save it and then like take it out of checking your savings.
It's not how life works.
Dude,
Who plays that?
Seriously, every time, you know, this is my dating phase, not replication phase. Every time I would tell someone that, she'd always be like, well, why don't you just put it all into savings and then take half of it and put it in checking? Like, really? Like, you don't have a job. You just got laid off because you don't like the month of February. You're going to give me financial advice?
What's someone?
Kendra Holiday. Oh, don't start. Kendra Holiday. She decided she didn't like February, so I guess we're in February. She worked at MasterCard, which had like a processing unit out in St. Louis, and she decided she just was going to quit, and she didn't like Februaries. Dude, after a little bit of that, and then she's giving me financial advice. I don't
replicate with her.
Yeah, I don't think you're trying to replicate. You're thankful that you didn't replicate. No, so car loans. Let's look at this report. How do I want to look at it? Okay, I know how I want to do this. $32.71.
Did you hear about that one guy who's running for president who wants? He's calling it basic, whatever basic.
Oh, basic income. We're going to talk about that today.
So his thing is not like a full-on communism where the state controls it, but pretty much everybody gets $1,000 a month just for being.
I would like it, but you know what the trade-off is. The trade-off then is that you will never get. Oh, I can't do it because I'm now in dual push.
You can get out?
You can get out of it.
I don't think employees can. Maybe?
Yes.
Really?
Head of security was talking to me about it today. I'm not sure how to do it, but
No.
he said you sign up for it just to do the, what's it called, the direct deposit.
Yeah.
But once you do it, you can like get out of it somehow. I think you have to go up to the where you do the direct deposit and just say
Yeah.
you want out of it. But they needed you to do it for the to set it up for the new system. So,
What's this guy's name?
Do you think they straight from
Yeah,
that's what it sounds
I
like.
heard.
A same exact
Yes, we probably need some reply.
with
Go
every single
over
question.
it, yeah, go through all of it and then ask any question that is. So, my friend said, if you, like,
Another way to flashback.
This way I'm
I
doing.
think,
Yeah,
what's
like
that?
11:30, I think.
I'm thinking that.
So, for those of you who like this kind of part of the discussion here, this guy, Lev, from the Wall Street Journal, he gives us a really good understanding of data every time.
5 minutes. Andrew Yang. I was listening to him on Joe Rogan.
Scheiding, you're gonna have to put in your dual.
That's the guy's name, Andrew Yang. He's Taiwanese.
Wait, what's his name?
Andrew Yang.
Andrew Yang. No. I got this one to work only because it's only using my paid for. I paid $10 a month for this. Fortunately, I'm gonna take out the $10 for a little bit here, so I'm all good.
Yeah. I think Audible. I don't know if it's a good investment.
Which one?
Audible.
Mm.
Because you don't get any books. You just get you.
Isn't it owned by Amazon?
Yeah. You pay for the ability to use it, and then you get like a credit every month for a free book.
Yeah.
I get
But
another book till the 28th.
Hmm.
The first one I got was Art of War.
was what?
Art of War. It's
She's
the
saying,
one
yeah.
that was narrated. Do you watch Game of Thrones? Does anyone watch Game of Thrones?
No.
No.
Is that the one where they like live in an ice castle or something?
That's part of it. No, but it sounds like the guy was like the most like he's like a snake, but he's like the malevolent guy who's like behind the shadows and does these twisted things.
Yeah.
His nickname is Littlefingers.
oh yeah, that
Yeah, it's narrated by him. It's amazing.
Okay, here's what I want to show you. I want to start with this. So this came out, and this is pretty significant because, okay, so here's what we're looking at. We are looking at loan repayment. So last Friday, the New York Federal Reserve Bank reported on people paying certain things. Now, the thing about a car is that you would think, for instance, that mortgages are like the one thing that people absolutely pay, like they make sure that that's the first thing taken out. But the data actually shows that cars are the last thing that people want to lose. Everything else they allow to kind of go to shit if they have to. Which makes some sense. What are the chances that your loan servicer is going to foreclose on your house, given the lengthiness of doing that, right?
And like a car, you need it to go to work.
So yeah, now let's start to turn this around, right? So you need it to get to work, and there's also this idea: if I lose my house, I could always live in my car. Which you might think is crazy, but let's put this out for perspective here, is that 44% of people that are homeless are actually working and living in their car. So, right, so when we think of homelessness, it's not as cool as like getting to like chillax and watch Netflix all day on
Dirty
Starbucks
Dan and the
Wi-Fi.
boys.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's look at this. So this is a pretty big upturn. For anyone that took, dude, Dylan, I don't think you're going to remember. Let's see, would you remember it from my first time around? No, I don't think you would remember it. I went on this whole rant and rave, I remember, for like 10 minutes about car loans being the next bubble that was going to burst.
What do you mean?
There we go. So, right, so I predicted it, dude. At least 2 people are going to remember that I predicted this car loan bubble. So we don't see that in loan repayments for homes. So homes are key. If you can't see this that closely, these are homes. So homes, dude, people are staying on top of it. What do we see up here? Student loans. Auto loans are now reaching their highest point. Credit cards. So all of the debt indicators indicate that basically the, now again, dude, remember, even though I told you what my checking account amount is, dude, I have a wife who earns more money than me, and I'll be fine, right? I'm gonna be fine for 6 more days. So I'm not economically as fragile as these individuals. I don't owe anyone any money. I just only have well over $30 in my checking account. I'm okay though. I don't have a student loan. I have nothing. I don't owe anyone anything. So, but we can think, right? What this illustrates for us, and the cool thing, I mean, the big thing about this is the divergence, especially for student loans. And that's important because student loans are the one thing that cannot be canceled, even upon death, huh?
Yeah, I was just listening to that.
That is like the most.
So bankruptcy, you cannot discharge it. And my free advice to all y'all, especially when you graduate, do not consolidate your loans with a private issuer. Do not consolidate your loans with a private issuer. The interest rate might be lower, but you are giving up a ton of protections by doing it. So for instance, if I whack your brain really hard and you become like unable to mentally do any work, if you have a federally financed loan, your loans will be forgiven because now you're disabled and you lost all your money-making power. In a privately refinanced federally original loan, you'll still have to pay that. It'll become part of your estate. Your heirs will have to pay for it. But it turns out there's big upticks in, for instance, senior citizens that are getting their Social Security check garnished because of student loan payments. Yeah, that's going to be the next bubble. Well, it is already a bubble, but I'm not worried about this part. Yeah, it's concerning. But look at this divergence. So this divergence here of the green line is the thing I'm really worried about. Because this signifies something that, although traditionally has been, for the most part, a little bit higher than the others, now it's a lot higher than the others, which is signaling certainly fragility in the automobile market, but it's also signaling the thing that people generally pay the loan on first. And this isn't the big amount, right? Typical auto loan would be what, $200 a month, $250 a month, maybe up to $400 a month, $500 a month. Right? A mortgage payment is $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month, $2,000 a month, right? At least on the mainland. Not here. $10,000, $11,000 a month. But the thing is that for that green line, so let's think about this. For the red line, credit scores don't even matter, right? You all have shitty ass, well, you might actually have good credit scores, but you might not have very long credit history. But everyone gets a student loan, regardless of your credit history. Credit history for car loans has traditionally been one where you can have much, much worse credit profiles and still get a car. More so than a house because it's really easy to repossess a car. It's harder to repossess a house. The car, yes, it depreciates, and certainly it depreciates a lot over those 2 years, but the sale cost of reselling a used car are not as bad as selling a house, obviously. So cars are kind of like the canary in the coal mine. That's my argument here. They are signaling, and I gotta remember, I'm a pessimist, and I always think the next recession is tomorrow. But it's another sign. It's a growing sign of fragility in the U.S. economy that this all of a sudden has increased significantly. The student loans, that's a perennial problem that is just going to keep getting worse and worse. But the green line, people are managing their mortgages well now, but now they're not managing their car loan well. So it's a problem. Now, the other piece of news that came out, and I did write this down. Last chance to get a condom if you need to. You can pretend you're going to the bathroom and no one will be the wiser that you're leaving. He's walking deliberately slowly. So, right, we can see this here. This would be the number of people who are behind 90 days or more. It's concerning. And I'm not really sure. Again, if you look at this profile here for mortgages, things are looking better than they were before the financial crisis. But again, we're starting to see, well, a little bit of pressure. Let's look at who is it that's in trouble. And this is somewhat concerning. The people that are most in trouble of paying off their loans would be exactly your age group, which would mean that for this case, it's the burden of the student loan that's making them unable to also then service their auto loan, which means it's unlikely that they're also going to get a mortgage, right? They're probably not even going to qualify for a mortgage if they're 90 days behind or more on their auto loan. The concerning point is that student loans are going to kill the economy because they're going to kill the ability of consumers to consume more, to buy a house, to buy junk, to have kids, and to talk to Jacob, right? To get your salvation. So it's not an economy-wide problem. It's just a problem of the group that unfortunately are going to be spending the most money, the millennials, which are right here. I'm the Gen Xers. I'm in the 40 to 49. But if any of you have seen my shitty car outside, you would know I'm not clearly in this group. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to look at was, and some of you may not have noticed this, but I certainly did because I care about this kind of thing, was where is it? Did I write down? Data office. Not really sure what to look up here. I can't find it. Anyway, one of the things that's coming up is that China's economy right now is about $12 trillion. U.S. economy is about $20 trillion. And the problem always with China has been that we don't really know what's going on in the country. The data is too smooth. It's not reacting like normal data does, as erratic as it does. And there's no clear methodology about how the data is collected. So the way that economic data is collected in the United States is that it's centralized. Meaning that, well, so for instance, we are in Region 9 for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics is located in DC, which means that they have employees, some of who are here on the island, most are in San Francisco, who basically take their directions from the central office in Washington, D.C., and then they measure the local conditions, send it back to D.C., and it's all homogenized. In China, the individual cities are in charge of figuring out how they're going to collect things and then sending however they collect their things to the central office. But it turns out then that there were some cities, pretty important manufacturing cities in China, that were overstating their contributions to GDP by almost a third. So basically, China then created the central government created a web page to shame those cities that are mismeasuring things, and to also release a common methodology about how data should be collected. But the individual cities have no incentive to show that their GDP might be faltering. And there's all of these kind of pressure points in the Chinese economy about how the economy is slowing down. And that's not that surprising because the Chinese economy has been growing constantly now since, well, pretty much 1990. Or really since 1979. So we shouldn't be, it's not like a bad thing that China is slowing down, but it should be noted that it's slowing down. It should be measured that it's slowing down. And the big source of that slowdown would be tensions in net exports, obviously, or tensions in exports to the rest of the world. Because as the rest of the world starts to either impose tariffs to stop things coming in from China, or the other economies are slowing down and they're just not buying as much. There's a variety of reasons about why China's economy is slowing down. They should at least measure it. And that's kind of what's being done here. But the latest update was that for the U.S., they have 60 more days. So the deadline right now is that China will impose tariffs, or U.S. will impose tariffs on Chinese goods in 60 days. But that March 1st date's coming up, and they're going to miss it. So I think the signal is that Trump's going to give them 60 more days to figure it out. Those are the news stories I saw. What about you guys before we jump into poverty and inequality?
Green Deal.
Yeah, there's that.
Also, I can't see them. Unless I could.
I don't know very much about the Green Deal. What do you know?
I heard that there's some language in it that's interesting.
Like how so?
I believe one of the propositions was to build the infrastructure for a high-speed rail throughout the United States to the point where it.
You know how big the United States is?
Yeah.
Dude, it would suck to sit on a train for two.
Well,
My-
the terminology was stating that they'll build it to the point where airplanes will become obsolete.
Yeah, exactly.
That was like,
I was going.
trains was actually one of Obama's kind of pet projects. He always wanted to do like these corridors
Yeah.
in like really populous, centers like San Francisco to Los Angeles and like the Midwest, Chicago to the Ohio cities. And,
Yeah.
it's like super huge project that's will take a big commitment.
But do you think, I mean, I guess the thing is do we, well, I mean, I guess when we think about it, do we,
It was written by the freshman, so.
oh, that woman that we just saw in there, yeah.
Yeah, so it definitely needs some polish, a lot of polish. Needs a lot.
Well, right, isn't also the thing too is that it's, isn't the thing as well is that we have to figure out, I mean, here's the thing. So the way that rail, my understanding, so I'm, moved here from the Midwest, which is like solid with, if we look at like Amtrak and how it looks. So for Amtrak, is anyone in here taking the Amtrak anywhere ever? Am I the only one who has? Yep, so I've taken the Amtrak. That's the only train you've ever been on. So the Amtrak, again, let's see here. I think we'll do it this way. This is what it looks like. Okay, so it's a lot of really long rails. So I lived for a time in Chicago, lived in Milwaukee, I lived in just outside of Harrisburg right here. And you could take the train once a day from Harrisburg all the way up to Boston. That trip took 9 hours if you wanted to do it. My parents, they are basically retired. They decided last summer they were going to take a trip all the way to Seattle. And they were going to bring my sister and my niece and nephew. And Truman and I decided to fly up to meet them in Seattle. So we flew up from here. We got up early in the morning, like 7 a.m. We got there at we got to Seattle at like 5 p.m. Stopped once in San Francisco, I think, and we made it. They had to drive because there was no way to do it. They live in Milwaukee, so they had to drive down to Chicago to catch the different train that would take them all the way. This trip then from Chicago to Seattle took 2 days, and the train was 12 hours late. But the reason why the train was 12 hours late, all of these lines you see on here, not the green ones are just buses, so let's not figure out let's not think about those. Those red lines, for the most part, with the exception of a few lines here in the upper northeast, all of these rail lines are actually owned by freight railroads, and their traffic gets priority. So the reason why the Amtrak train was 12 hours late was because they missed their window of transportation of using a line, because this one train carrying coal had to get through, and then you lose your spot, you sit stuck waiting on the side, waiting for your next chance to get through there.
Screw that, I was there.
Well, exactly. So, you know, again, it takes my parents being retired to like want to even endure a trip like this. Let's see here. Yeah, what do you got? Dylan, who did you raise your hand? Oh, that's someone. Let's go see here. Let's see how late a train is.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main thing I heard is that like because it's the freight is like prioritized.
Yeah.
That's why it's actually freight is actually very efficient and like, you know, in terms of like the transportation, it's actually like a really a big boon to the economy.
Yeah.
But the passengers, they take a back seat. They're like a complete afterthought. It's like, you know, a totally different market. It's like, you know, it's for super, you know, leisure. Like,
Yeah. No, exactly.
like, you know,
Yeah, and it
all
would.
the time in the world type passengers. So.
Let's see this train. So this would be the train that's arriving today. Oh, it was even canceled. So it didn't even make it. So there you go. So the train didn't even make it. Let's see. Minute late, 7 minutes late. Well, it's never going to make it.
So late.
2 hours, 43 minutes late. So they're all late. None of them are getting there early, or they're canceled entirely. So, yeah, so I guess the Green New Deal will solve this problem, I guess. Yeah, affordable, high-speed rail. Well, I guess the other thing, too, is right that California stopped their plan. So they were going to build something like what we're building, but they were going to build it from San Francisco to LA, which, if you're not from California, it's actually a pretty long distance. It's not that close as we would think. It's actually a very long distance. But, dude, there's like so many planes every hour that leave to make that run.
Right, so did they just change it to it's a train from, now it's just between two cities that no one really.
Yeah, so it looks like here, yeah, they're going to focus on 3 smaller Central Valley communities. And now they don't want to give back the money, the $3.5 billion. Well, and we have this thing, which I'm not really sure. I guess it's a part of the Green New Deal. Anyway, this is all politics, though, because the point of this is, which also then links back to today's actual discussion of poverty and inequality, would be that this isn't to say that the economy wouldn't. The reason why it's called a Green New Deal is think about what the New Deal did from 1933 to 37. It was the Keynesian attempt to stimulate the economy with expansionary fiscal policy. It turns out that the only way we could really get out of the Great Depression was by, you know, beating up the Japanese and by beating up the Nazis. But, right, I mean, at the time it was the only thing we knew, right, is let's build a whole bunch of junk and spend a bunch of money to stimulate the economy, which is what this is intending to do, right, is it's intending to build, so back in 33 to 37, it was, dude, the only people that have electricity are people who live in town. Shouldn't everyone have electricity? So like farms, everything else didn't have electric. So one of the things the government did was it formed the Rural Electrification Administration, which basically gave communities money to start their own electric companies. Sounds pretty nice, right? And it has a social objective, which is give everyone electricity. So this has a objective, right? That's the green part of it, right? Is let's all get together on a train and take a train somewhere. But then the New Deal is the expansionary fiscal policy that we saw during the Great Depression. But this is all politics at this point. I'm not going to get all hot and bothered about this because think about all the things. If you are a Republican, think about all the things you hate. You actually hate all three words. Green New Deal. You actually hate all three words. So if we're trying to think about like, you know, it's just you hate everything about it. So of course they're going to put it up for a vote, and of course it's not going to pass. And then Republicans are going to say that the Democrat running for an office is trying to make us all ride the dumpy bus together, right? And it's not even stimulating the economy, right? And then the other group is going to say, hey, we're never going to pass it anyway, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to pay it much thought. Unlike poverty and inequality, which is our focus for today. This is what I learned. This is the interesting. So every week when I write this lecture, there are things I know. This week I know more things. Like when I had to do the Bitcoin lecture, there was almost nothing I knew before I did that one. This one, I know something. I knew some things about. But here's the thing I learned. So I was reading a report by the EPI, the Economic Policy Institute, and this is the cool thing I learned, is that between the ages of 25 and 75, that the average, what is this? That most people in the US, at least 1 year between the age of 25 and 75, will live a year in poverty. I thought that was actually, I mean, I'd never really seen a statistic run that way, but that at some point in our life between the age of 25 and 65, the average American will have lived at least 1 year in poverty. Yeah, graduate school that's different. It wasn't like I had a cat. Right, I mean, so yes, I lived in poverty, but I had a cat, and that was the only thing I was responsible for. I didn't have a car, I had to walk everywhere. How much should I make a month? My $700 a month, I think. $425 to live in this creepy apartment. What was it? 96 Navarro Street. And the guy was crazy. It was certainly not a legal apartment. He lived in a 2-story house. And he basically cut a hole for a door on the 2nd story, a hole in the wall for the door. And there was only one door. And then he made some stairs, but it was more ladder than stairs to get to the unit. Jeez. Where's that? Oh man, that place is creepy. Anyway, that was my only experience with Navarro Street. Oh God, this takes me back. Wait, what? It doesn't look that nice. Here we go. Let's go back. Oh, but it looked really nice. So, because it was right on. I was right by. Yeah, it was kind of near Corby's too. Where am I? Why am I looking at this? There's a reason why. Somewhat. There's a reason why. Where's Navarro Street? Am I not remembering the street right? It was near the hospital. Navarre, not Navarro, Navarre Street. That's what it was. Which takes me back. Here it is, right here. Oh, wait. No, right here, right here. This is the house right here. This is this guy's house. He had 2 doors, and then you had to go all the way to the back of this house, and then I had the 2nd story of it. $425 a month. That was half my income. $700 a month. Yeah, I had about $8,000 for myself and a cat. Yeah, that sucked. But I did have a nice view of the river down here. But there were dead bodies sometimes in it, so it's not like it was that fantastic. I guess you could sit here and look at the dead bodies float by. No, it wasn't like a lot, but there were a few. So I mean, I think that's interesting. Now, again, that's not really a good point of comparison because I'm not trying to say I'm like salt of the earth poor. Like, that's graduate school. Everyone's poor, and not almost everyone's poor in graduate school. And that's not, I didn't have any dependents. I didn't have, I wasn't sickly. Like, if I had any medical issues, then that probably would have been really shitty. If I didn't feel industrious and I had to walk to school, like, then it would have really sucked. Is that a line bike there, parked there?
Yep.
Yeah, wow. Then the person jumped in the river and died. They parked right there and then died. Wow, it's really become cool there. But what?
It also depends on like what kind of safety nets you have. If you have like parents that can like, oh, worst case scenario, just working with them and they can support me. It's like
Absolutely.
But if those parents are also in poverty, then it's like that's sort of how the cycle of poverty.
And it usually is, right? I mean, poverty is contagious for good reason. So let's talk about what does it mean to be poor? How do we calculate being poor? And then let's talk about what that safety net looks like, and then just the general history of things. So the calculation we use for poverty is politically tinged, and that definition doesn't come about until 1963. So in 1959, the poverty rate is estimated that in the U.S. that 1 in 5 people, 1 in 5 households were at poverty level. So about 20%. Now, what that poverty means, right? Like our popular notion would be, dude, $30 in your checking account, that would seem impoverished. But for government statistical purposes, given all the things that one becomes eligible for when they are considered poor, the government's going to want a definition. So in 1963, basically, the president at the time, President Johnson, right? JFK had just been knocked off. So President Johnson was going to do this whole war on poverty thing. That was going to be his signature domestic program. And he had to ask someone, basically, he had to ask someone at the Department of Commerce, how should we actually measure what poverty is? So this woman, Martha Orshansky, old, even at the time, old woman, who had been like, where had she been saved from? She was this.
Did you know President B used to make Secret Service look at his dick when he pee?
I heard that about him. No, I did hear that. I heard he was like a very, yes, in honor of Valentine's Day. Yes, I heard that he was a guy who wanted assessments of his size and didn't mind showing others his size.
Like
what
he made the Secret Service watch him.
Yes, and that he would turn to show said size. That's what I've heard as well. But who knows? I mean, I don't know the guy. It could be true, could be not. I think it's Orshansky.
Oh, you mentioned?
Yeah, here she is. Oh yeah, old even then. Right? Or Molly. Sorry, not Martha. Molly. She's old even then. Anyway, let's find out what Molly's. Sorry, it's not Martha. It's Molly. But she was old even then, is what I'm trying to say here. So this is when she had to come up with the stat, and look at her then. She looks like a music teacher. Anyway, yeah, so she's Jewish immigrants, left the Ukraine, World War II, and the most important thing to her, given the circumstances, are dude, right? I mean, she had like Stalin killing all of her family members, right? The Nazis were on the other side. She's Jewish, so she's stuck between two shitty groups that really want to knock her off, right? She's got the Russians, right? The Soviets, we shouldn't call them Russians, it makes it sound even nicer. She's got Soviets on one side, she's got Nazis on the other. They all want her dead. Her notion of poverty was food oriented. That's the key point of what I'm trying to say here. Her notion of poverty was entirely oriented around food. Now, as all of us know, and even certainly myself, like, well, again, only my graduate school career, dude, there's lots of ways to think about poverty, right? You can be poverty because you can't afford the medical care you need. You can be poor, you can be in poverty because you don't have the housing that you need. Food is just one aspect of it. But for her, it was the most important thing that she knew of. So the simplest way to calculate what it meant to be poor for her was that a household needed to have 3 times the amount to feed the family. Right? So if your budget was, let's say, $300 a month, your food budget, then you would need $900 to feed a person. So right now in the United States, the poverty level, that equation is still used to this day, 3 times the amount of food that you need to live for a month. The poverty line, I think for a single individual is going to be about 14 and some change, I think. Just look at it here. Yeah. So for a single individual, so 2017, so it'll be a little higher than this. So it'll be probably closer to 13,000. So that would be basically living on $1,000 a month.
Is this still being used today?
Yes, absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
This is crazy because it's like it doesn't even take into account housing costs.
It does not. No, it's 3 times the amount.
Housing and food
Yep.
at least.
Or medical care, or transportation, or child education. And I say child education not because I'm saying like you're sending your kids to private school. I'm actually saying, well, what do you do before age 5, right? I mean, you don't want your kids. I mean, you don't have to send your kids to preschool, but your child is going to be behind when they don't go to school until kindergarten. Right? Most of the development happens before they're age 5. So in Hawaii, to be poor sucks because there's really no public option for preschool like there are in many states on the mainland, for instance. So yeah, so $12,000, that will actually pay, it'll almost be enough to pay for a year of Truman going to preschool, which is either saying I'm paying too much, or I'll look at it the damn way of saying that's not enough. That's probably a mix of both, or probably more if it's too expensive. But this is also why it's contagious, right? Because if I'm poor and I can't send my kid to preschool, now my kid's going to be dumb and he's going to be poor too, right? Right? This is the contagion of it. Not any fault of his own, but yeah, the biggest critique of this would be is that that's not enough. Now, the reason why the federal government needs to know this is because in 1933 to 1937, that was the New Deal. But most of the programs that we know of today did not do anything to eliminate poverty. The only thing they really did to eliminate poverty was there was a minimum wage, 25 cents an hour, right? So that certainly helped. And the only other poverty reduction program was that there was Social Security. But the Social Security age at that point was so high that most people didn't live that long. So most people didn't collect it. So as much as some of you may like Franklin Roosevelt, he didn't do very much to reduce poverty. Because again, by 1959, you still have 1 in 5 households being in poverty. Not even have, so what we're saying here is they don't even have $12,000, right? Even this very low threshold, they don't even have that. Because if we expand this out, so right now, in the United States, about 19% of households have less than this. 100 million, that's 1 in 3 households, have what we would consider near poverty, which would mean a little bit more than this. So they don't qualify anymore for the things that you need at poverty level, but they don't have a lot more than that. So you'll notice here that the other title here is Medicaid eligibility, 138%. That would mean that would be, we're basically talking about a household having less than $16,000 a year, which still isn't a lot of money. The minimum wage job will get you Let's do math. Someone with their calculator. 1010 times 40. Times what? Times 4 times 12.
19,392.
Right, so that would be $19,000 if you worked every day, didn't take any vacations. You'll get $19,000 in Hawaii. Now, minimum wage on the mainland is $7.25, so let's do the same math for $7.25.
725 times
40 times 4 times 12 gets me what?
13,140.
Yep, just enough to be above the poverty line, huh? Look at the convenience of that. Now, what I was saying here was that the New Deal didn't do very much to eliminate poverty. We basically had, again, two programs. Minimum wage, first passed in the New Deal, and you had Social Security for really, really old people. And it only paid you out if you were old and retired. But what the Johnson administration did was in 1964, he declared this war on poverty. And all of the programs that we know of today as that social safety net, all of those programs are passed during the Johnson administration. So let's look at what some of these are. Food stamps, that's a big one, right? So food stamps, average household gets about $200 a month that actually qualifies for food stamps. Average households gets about $200 a month. Head Start, right? So that would be kids being able to go to preschool. What some people might not like as much would be the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which basically was the federal government saying, dude, schools across the country have to do some minimum education standards. Now, it gets controversial because that same act is what the Bush administration used for No Child Left Behind. But that first legislation of like, you can't teach creationism in Alabama, right? That law, that law is saying you gotta standardize some things, and there's a minimum threshold you need to reach. Because think about it, if states can dictate, states are the ones that are financing public education. If you live in a really Republican cheap ass state, right, they're not going to want to fund public education that way, right? Because kids can't vote, right? So why would you do that? The TRIO program, that's actually pretty big here, even on this campus. So the TRIO program would be basically programs that support for college students, right? First generation college students. The TRIO programs are all funded then. It's other things too. It's basically a lot of the well, Section 8 housing, all of these things. So that poverty, and I look at this and it looks piss poor on YouTube. So most of the poverty in the United States is located in Appalachia. Appalachia would be, if we look over here, let's go back to our map here. West Virginia, Kentucky, piss poor area here that's mainly, used to be coal mining, but a really poor part of the country, still is an incredibly poor part of the country. But this would be before the
harshest places on
I don't want to watch this whole thing.
By
I don't
searching
want to
your
watch
search
this whole
engine
thing.
can help you. You can transform landscapes like this.
You make me watch 2 ads?
into
Seriously?
this.
Let's skip ads. Jeez.
The following program is on NET.
This is the old PBS. PBS used to be called NET. It's from 1960. Now, the reason why I'm picking this is because it's before the 1964 act by the Johnson administration. So it's movies like this that are then telling Johnson, dude, I got to do something about poverty. Because again, FDR didn't do very much. So again, the prospect here is that in 1960, when this film was made, the federal government has no role in poverty reduction. There is no social safety net. The only thing you've got is the church that you belong to and benevolent people. So the federal government, there's no food stamps, there's no Medicare, there's no Medicaid, no Medicare, no Medicaid, no supplemental disability insurance from Social Security, there's no Section 8 housing, there's none of the things that, right, that if you were sick and poor, I would say, dude, qualify for Medicaid, right? Go to the office and figure it out, right? None of that's here. So this is, I'm not going to watch this for 58 minutes. Let's just jump to the people being poor. Let's find her being poor here. So, you know, they're living in a house that looks pretty shitty. You're not going to see anyone that's got any weight to them. All these kids are going to be really skinny. Let's just see how shitty this is here. I'm just jumping to the shittier parts. This kid's clearly mining something illegally or picking up something from the basement of his house. Sorry.
Makes a big difference. Just a bad situation anywhere you go.
So this is coal mining.
The wealth of Appalachia is underground. Much of it, however, is owned by land and coal companies outside the region in cities like New York, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia. They bought the coal rights from the mountaineers around the turn of the century for as little as 50 cents an acre. Since then, much of the profit has left the region.
Okay, poor.
You know, Warnie, they worked right on up to the night they shut her down. They said, she's gone, boys.
What the hell did you just say?
I have no idea. Sounds like Bill Fontaine de la Dufftree and
all the furniture and stuff back out of this hall.
no.
Big cars, fine automobiles. It's fine. But I had luck.
I'm just trying to jump to there's another one where it's this one's 3 minutes. I can do 3 minutes. Okay. I don't want to hear. I don't need to hear gospel. But okay, so I guess while this is going on here, you can look at images while I'm talking. So the Johnson administration in 1964 says we're going to essentially declare war on poverty and passes all of these programs throughout the rest of his administration. Now remember, at the time, we're also sending a man to the moon, and we're also beating up the Vietnamese. So you gotta remember, we're doing 3 very expensive things here. That was a cool pipe. Anyway, we're doing 3 very expensive things here. But they were very effective. So the effectiveness is measured here is that the poverty rate in 1963 was 17.3%. By 1973, it was 11.1%. So the total, this whole war on poverty, the total cost of it is estimated to be, I wrote this down, $15 billion. So $15 billion was spent in the 1960s for all those programs I just told you, Head Start, food stamps, the school lunch program, all of those programs are passed in the 1960s under the Johnson administration. They all cost a total of $15 billion. It's estimated that had that not been done, had we not had all the programs that we have today that are from this Johnson administration, that the poverty rate right now would be 29% in the United States if we did not have any of those programs. Instead, it's about 16%, 16 to 19%, depending on how you measure it. We should not feel proud of ourselves though, because that is still the highest poverty rate among all industrialized countries. And even it kind of, as Dan points out here, it's still a really low, shitty threshold to even say someone's measured as poverty, right? I mean, some of you in this room might earn more than that, and you still would not consider yourselves rich by any means. But it's also, the more important thing here is that it's not fair in how it's distributed. Anyone want to guess what the poverty rate is among the elderly in the United States right now? So how many old people are under the poverty line?
Probably higher than the average.
Well, what do you think of this? So the average right now is about let's call it 16 to 19%.
Maybe 25.
1 in 10. 1 in 10 elderly people are in poverty. So 10%, 10.1%. Primarily because of Social Security as well as Medicare. Plus, Medicare can be combined with Medicaid to basically cover everything for medical care. So Medicare and Medicaid together with Social Security puts almost every senior above the poverty line. Yeah, right, yeah.
Is that a conservative estimate though?
It's the best estimate I mean, with all these things, it's the best estimate we have, and it's done with a survey. So we don't really know what all old people earn, but the best estimate we have is that it's about 10.1%. Now, what about for kids? Anyone want to guess what it is for kids? Yep, poverty rate. How many kids are in poverty? Yep, exactly, 1 in 5. So 1 in 5 versus 1 in 10. Now, let's look at where it was in 1964, the year that the war on poverty started. So for kids, they were at 23%. So they went from 23% to 20% in 5 decades. So the war on poverty really hasn't helped them that much. But for seniors, now this goes back actually to Dan's point then, is that it was 28.5% in 1966 and 10% in 2009. So clearly the war on poverty, as much as we'd like to say like school lunch, 10.1%. Oh, what's in the video of?
Assassin's Creed 3.
Incredibly racist notions of Native Americans, or what is it?
Assassin's Creed 3 trailer.
Is it really?
Man, something Appalachian.
I don't think so. Maybe.
Redemption 2.
Oh, it is. Wow. Oh, maybe it's the people that the Appalachians stole the land
Oh, is this
from.
the Federation? Could be.
Oh, it could be.
What is it called? The church?
No, it could be.
What was the Federation called?
The Federation?
Like that.
Oh, that tribe? Yeah, I don't know.
Or like they had like a bunch of tribes and they call themselves.
Yeah. I know a reservation. Yeah, tribe. This is by the way, if you're kind of curious about these kinds of things, this is the classic movie, Shannon County, Hearts of the Children. If you're kind of curious about how these things looked even in the 70s, this is kind of the go-to movie that people watch when they want to see what things look like. But the war on poverty really helps old people more than it does children. But it turns out that poverty programs geared towards children are cheaper, far cheaper than they are for old people. So let's look at the school lunch program, right? So a school lunch program, which unfortunately in Hawaii, you guys don't do it very well, but the federal government will actually pay for both breakfast and lunch at a school where there's enough kids that qualify for free or reduced school lunch.
Oh yeah.
But in Hawaii, most schools don't actually do the breakfast part. So that would mean that if you're really poor, right, that would mean that sometimes your only meal might be the free school lunch, right? Or if you have dinner, you're probably not going to get breakfast, and now you're just going to have to last until lunch. So that doesn't cost very much, though. And if we think about all the nutritional benefits, but also things like academic performance that are tied to having enough food, it's immeasurable, right? And it's very, very cheap. Or if we even think about kids going to the doctor, right, versus your grandparents go to the doctor, right? Your grandparents go to the doctor, their liver is shot. Their liver, right, is like decades of drinking blown away, right? They need new knees, they've got dementia, they've got a host of problems, right? And what do little kids go to the doctor for? just nipples, right? I mean, yes, there are special needs children, there are, right, kids have issues too. But for the most part, we're talking about, right, broken arms, which are pretty cheap to resolve, right? Little things on a preventative basis that prevent bigger problems from happening. Head Start, right? The cost, and this is the debate we're having right now in the ledge that's going on right now, is what if we move the 6th grade classrooms at our elementary schools to the middle school? What that does is it opens up a classroom at our elementary schools for then 4-year-olds to start preschool. Now, it's going to cost something. Right now on the islands, if my memory serves me right, there's like 4 DOE public schools that do preschool, I think, because they have an extra room sitting around. It's like a pilot program. But EGA wants to expand it to, he wants to expand it to like 40 public schools or 50 public schools, something like that. He wants to move a bunch of 6th graders to middle schools, open up the classroom, hire teachers, reconfigure things, and open it up to preschoolers. I think that looks untrustworthy. The guy in the suit, not the other guy.
Yeah, look at those sideburns.
Yeah, look at that car. Oh, where's that guy going on the boat?
They're putting in a life jacket, so there must be a lake nearby.
I hope so. Otherwise, that guy's taking.
There it is. Oh, yeah, that's
There we
right.
go. Lindy's canoe rental. So, 5 million, forget this, 5 million people in the United States right now live, sorry, not 5 million people, 5 million households in the US have people that are living on less than $2 a day. So $2 a day, right? That's hot dog combo and a little bit more existence for the household, $2 a day. That's actually the measure we use to measure poverty in third world countries. So the United States, right, isn't certainly the land of plenty when it comes to this. So the biggest state where this poverty exists is Alabama. Let's look at Alabama. Oh, and this woman feels bad because we're slandering her. Or David thinks that we are. So Alabama is regularly listed, identified as one of the most impoverished, well, 40%. So that would be the equivalent of a state being like the Leeward Coast. So on the Leeward Coast right now, the poverty rates are pretty high. How high? By like Miley and Nanakuli, the poverty rates are close to 40 or 50%, but that's specific districts for the Leeward side. Let's see here if I can get a map here going. I can't. So 27% for at least the Waianae region. Actually, let's just do the map here. So Makaha, wait, no, I think it'll actually be worse than Nanakuli. That's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing here. Okay. So yeah, and, let's see here. So Makaha's got 30% poverty, Waianae 27%, Nanakuli 16%. These would be the most impoverished areas right now in almost all of Hawaii, all of the islands. These are your most impoverished areas. 27%, 30%, 20%, 16%. Obviously, when you go to town, right? And remember, so the poverty rate here in the United States, they adjust the numbers up slightly because things do cost more here, but it's not much more. It's instead of $12,000, it's like 13 or 14,000. So what I'm trying to say here, what I'm trying to illustrate to you here is we have all been to the Leeward Coast. Some of us live on the Leeward Coast, right? And if you live in Waianae, you live in Nanakuli, dude, it is poor, right? I mean, you can look around at all the abandoned cars and you know it's poor. But imagine a whole state like that is what we're kind of trying to say here with Alabama. So let's look at it for Alabama. So poverty is collected by the Census Department. And let's go to the mainland here. Has anyone ever been to Alabama? I've been to Birmingham. It sucked. Oh, I got to see a Saturn V rocket though. That was kind of cool. Like, huh?
Did you see it launch?
No, you just get to see like an old broken one. So
That's pretty cool.
yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see here. Take it out. So Birmingham, by poverty, is going to be so if we look here, right? Russellville City, Alabama, 31%, 16%, 28%. 35%. These are some pretty poor locations, right? But this is an entire state that's like that, right? We all know the Leeward Coast is bad, but this is an entire state that's in this process. But despite all the money that we are currently spending on Medicaid, which is again healthcare for the poor, School Run Program, Head Start, the poverty rate has been exactly the same for decades. It's been exactly the same. So the only progress or lack of progress that's been made was in 1996 during the Clinton administration. And during the Clinton administration, Bill Clinton drastically reduced the welfare system in the United States, which is kind of surprising, right? Because usually when you think Democrat, you think expanded social safety net. But in this case, it was a retraction of it. A retraction of it to the extent that, again, when you talk about these things like, you know, African-American mother, 5 kids, doesn't work and gets like a big fat paycheck every month. That's not typically the case, one. Two, that kind of example though was used as a way to then say, we need to make things like work requirements for those who are able, that there are time limits, that if you're not a US citizen, you don't get to collect. Dude, you can't even be from, right? You can't even be from the, you can't even be from the Marshall Islands, can you? Or where can you can't be from Guam, I think, right? That you can collect Medicaid here on the islands. Yeah, I mean,
Marshallese can.
Marshallese.
They can because we accidentally, well, not accidentally, but we knew a couple of them.
Yeah, exactly. But right, so I mean, it's pretty strict. You have to be a U.S. citizen, and you pretty much need to be not a U.S. resident, right? Which would be what you are if you lived in like Puerto Rico or something like. We're talking about you have to be a U.S. citizen to be a part of the social safety net. And even then, there are limits on how long you can be on it. For the most part, 2 years. 2 years, and then you do not get benefits anymore unless you are permanently physically disabled. And that's not an easy criterion to meet. You can't just say, dude, my leg's missing. Even for something like your legs are missing, there's usually a pretty lengthy process to be defined as physically disabled. That's even physically disabled. When we think of mental incapacities that cause someone, mentally to be able to do a job, I mean, it's gonna even be worse, right? I mean, or it's gonna even be more difficult, right? To get defined in that kind of way. And that's all to be able to be a part of this. So it had a great name. It was named well. It was called the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunities Act. Basically, drastically curtailed the ability of anyone to collect, to have a social safety net. So in this case, the way that the net exists right now, and some of you may know, right? The way that the net exists right now is that the social safety net is intended to only temporarily assist you, and that's it. And basically a 2-year time period. You have 2 years to shape up and figure something out. And it sounds really harsh when it comes out from me that way, but that's the way that they're saying it, right? Is that this poverty that you are stuck in now is something you need to figure out in 2 years. And in 2 years, you better be out of it because there's nothing else coming from the federal government after those 2 years are done. Again, then you're going to have to turn to a church. You have to marry a Kardashian. You're going to have to do something different to support yourself out of that poverty, which would mean, right, that if you're the average person living in Bruton City, Alabama, you've probably exhausted that 2 years. Which then means that you are having to work at Dollar General and figure out a way to pay for your health care. Unless you've got someone physically disabled in your household, and that's how you're qualifying for it. No one's rich off of this. Now, this goes back to, when was it you that was talking about the permanent income? Who was just talking about the permanent income before? So was it Jacob?
The universal basic income.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we were talking about universal basic income, this is kind of like the way to get around this or to revive this idea of the social safety net, which would be, we will no longer have a social safety net. Everyone will just get $1,000 a month. And it's up to you to figure out how it's going to be used. Sounds pretty sweet, if you ask me. From a guy who's got $37 in his checking account.
Extra $1,000.
Right, but the $1,000, so it's kind of useful because if you think about it, the way that it works now is you get food stamps, that's $200 some. You get Medicaid, we're just talking about a typical poor person. You get Section 8 housing, let's say you're just really poor. Section 8 housing, food stamps, Medicaid. That would be your 3 big things. So let's say you get enough food stamps to basically buy beans and rice. You have Section 8 shitty housing, and you've got Medicaid where you don't have enough providers that you can go to that offer you, right? Because you can have Medicaid insurance, but you might not have the doctors that do it for you, right? You're not getting dental care. Medicaid doesn't cover dental care in Hawaii. Doctors get to choose whether they take Medicaid, and the Medicaid reimbursement rates are so low, most doctors don't want to take it. So you can have Medicaid, but you're not going to have a doctor necessarily you can go to. You put that all together, and you're probably receiving what, maybe $1,500, $2,000 in basic total assistance every month, month in, month out. What if I just gave you $2,000, right? What if I just gave you $1,000 a month and said, you figure out month to month how you're going to use this money. We're going to offer you nothing. There's no Social Security. There's no social safety net ever. You're just going to always get $1,000 a month. That's how it's going to work. Then it's up to you to figure out how you're going to use it. So you could say, dude, I'm going to live on just rice alone, and I'm going to eat leaves outside, and I'm going to go to school, right? So that 4 years from now, I can then, right, and I'll sleep in my car, so that 4 years from now, I can have a college degree and then get a better job. So the idea is stop forcing people to spend $200 a month on food, right, which is kind of what you're doing with food stamps. And most people use that whole amount, but what if you said, I could really use the money a different way. I can get my food for free because I work at a restaurant, right, or figure out your thing, right? maybe it would be better, at least from a microeconomic standpoint, if people could allocate money how they wanted to. Now, it avoids what economists call these corner solutions. So that was a popular idea about 10 years ago. So Finland did a really big study where they figured it out. Quebec did a really big study where they selected certain people in poverty positions and said, instead of giving you what we give you, we're just going to give you straight up cash. Okay, so how do we think it worked out?
Let's find out.
Let's find out. Quebec was the one example. I don't know, people in Quebec are kind of like us, right?
Well, from just the idea was that from what I was listening to, bullshit, but the guy was like, you still keep your welfare benefits.
Yes.
Get an extra $1,000. Like everyone gets an extra $1,000 on top of whatever they're getting already. Supposedly, what the claim is that it'll with that $1,000 they'll get it from like taxing some shit.
Right.
And then supposedly with that $1,000 you'll stimulate the economy more because technology is displacing jobs. Like he was talking about like how truckers, they might not have a job.
Right, exactly. If cars
and
can
they
drive
can
themselves.
use that $1,000 if they don't have a job. And
Right.
They'll get retrained. But it was all speculation from what I was
Well, so see, but again, this is the idea is that poor people want to work too.
Right.
And poor people don't want to be poor. They don't want to. Let's take that a little further. That poor people don't want to just accept a handout from the government because it is kind of shitty, right? I mean, it's shitty to have to, oh, God, I remember, and it's only from my childhood. I remember from when my father was laid off, my mother wasn't working, my father was laid off, and you had this like, so instead of food stamps, back in the day, they gave you food, but it looked so shitty. So it was like this big like can of tuna. It was like a white label that said like given to you by the people of the USA. It was like a picture. You know how like as a kid, how you draw a fish, right? How as a kid do you draw a fish? There's no markers there.
The tail.
Exactly, where you do it, exactly. So the picture,
fish.
yeah, and there was cheese, and it was a triangle. So imagine a white label on a can, most basic picture, and powdered milk, like all those like shitty ways of thinking of how you could eat food. Like, I don't want to live like that. It's a shitty thing to have to do. It's a shitty thing to have to eat. So if people want to be poor, and people do want to work like that person kind of saying job or income now, then the whole idea behind this all is give people a basic income that they know they can always rely on, and people being how they are, they're going to want to work. That's the internal motivation. People aren't just going to want to sit on their ass and do nothing. So this is 2017. So the idea is that they gave this to so they're going to keep getting a little bit higher. So the guaranteed minimum income is going to be $18,029.
Holy shit!
That's quite a bit of money. Yeah. I don't know. Can we find out how it's doing? Let's just look at the Wikipedia entry and see what it says. Ontario, I guess, is doing it too. I mean, honestly, I don't really know very much about it.
Is it Canada or France that has a stud president?
It's which one in which way? So
Like
France has the one where the guy is with the cougar. The guy is like in his 40s and she's in like her 60s, I think, or maybe his 30s. And then Trudeau is the son of the Canadian Prime Minister that was very famous. But interestingly enough, that Canadian Prime Minister is about to probably get voted out of office because of a bunch of scandals. Generally speaking, it's good to know what's happening with your country's biggest trading partner. So as much as we like to all keep up on U.S. politics, we should probably all keep up like Scheiding on Canadian politics as well. They are our biggest trading partner. It turns out that the Canadians, not the hockey team, but the Canadians, the people, it turns out that Trudeau, what did he do? It's like a whole nepotism thing, and then someone doesn't want to, there's a scandal, and basically Trudeau didn't kick the person out of office, and now the voters are probably going to kick Trudeau out of office. And that would be really bad because there's not really an heir apparent to taking over.
They don't have like vice prime ministers.
No, and actually, technically speaking, Canada is still part of the British Commonwealth.
Right.
It's just run independently. So technically speaking, the Queen runs it, just like Australia and just like Jamaica.
In New Zealand.
In
In New Zealand.
In New Zealand, yeah, in Australia, and India not, right? India no more.
They're independent. Technically.
They're independent, but they're part of the Commonwealth. Yeah.
I thought they severed ties with them.
Who did, India?
Yeah.
Yes, India is the exception. Yeah, so India is completely broken off. But this is where a lot. So the reason why we're still talking about this here is that this is where a lot of the focus is now on poverty reduction in the United States and around the world. Is give everyone some basic monthly income and let them figure it out, right? So as you kind of see here under models, right, this is the idea that people are going to use their money to go to school. That people would, there's these bunch of articles from Sweden and Finland and all those cold countries where people spend money to start their own business, like, you know, making movie scripts or something. That basically people, if you give them the money to do things, that they will do things that will get them a job, a stable job, which seems like a pretty good deal. But the net result of this is, or the counter to this, is this movie. Oh yeah, so the most conservative person that existed in the world is this Milton Friedman guy. He's a really nice guy. He's just very conservative. And he's probably our best. So at Stanford, so Milton Friedman's papers are at the Hoover Institute at Stanford. He kept a lot of things. So I actually looked at his archival papers. He's got boxes and boxes and boxes of things he's written. But Friedman, when he, in 1976, he retired from the University of Chicago. He then spent about a year living in Kahala on sabbatical right before he retired. So he lived in Kahala, taught at UH Manoa. I guess he likes the sun. And then he moved to Stanford. Not bad, huh?
I was raised in New York City, which is,
In reference to talking about government's role in a free society, you mentioned some of the.
So the reason why I'm showing you this here is I'm not a good proponent of the conservative viewpoint of why we shouldn't alleviate poverty. So I'm not going to be a good defender of it, but this guy will. Hey, you're right. It is the young Superman. You're right.
Smallville?
Yeah, from Smallville. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, but it's true, right? I mean, you always think of these instances, right? Like if people could time travel, how come we don't see them holding cell phones back in the day, right? Or like stopping Lincoln from getting shot, or
Every time they try, someone stops them.
exactly like in that that one Hulu series, right? 1163, right? 11/21/63, yeah.
Market failures, and I think that you may have just passed over one that is of utmost importance, and that is of poverty. And in prefacing my question, I'd like to refer to what President Kennedy said, that if a free society cannot help the many who are poor, you cannot save the few who are rich. And to say that, well, we are a government of the people, and when there is a large sector of the people who are hurting, perhaps it is the responsibility of this government of the people to help out. My question.
So just listen to this, right? This is actually reasoned debate. We should all feel ashamed of ourselves. We can't have a conversation like this. Yeah, someone not wearing yeah, there's no names being called. This guy's got even a pen in his pocket. That's how studious he is.
My question is regarding how free are the poor, how free are the unemployed, and how free are those people who are disadvantaged? And so in reference to that, what is government's role? First of all,
now Milton Friedman, by the way, is about like he's like leprechaun size. He's about like 5'2", 5'1". Just so you know, so you can get a good picture in your head. He's a leprechaun.
I'm glad to see one vote for the floor. First of all, the government doesn't have any responsibility. People have responsibility. This building doesn't have responsibility. You and I have responsibility. People have responsibility. Second, the question is, how can we as people exercise our responsibility toward our fellow man most effectively? That's the problem. So far as poverty is concerned, there has never in history been a more effective machine for eliminating poverty than the free enterprise system and the free market.
That is, for the most part, true. What he just said there, which would be the best way to get rid of poverty is to introduce capitalism, right? Which the Chinese have discovered, which, right, in India has been discovered, which in somewhat in Mongolia has been discovered, in the former Soviet Union has been discovered, Cuba.
India is a lot less impoverished than before.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Then when it was a colony of the British Empire and largely socialistic, or even think of Vietnam, right? Still technically communist, but for the most part not.
Well.
Yeah.
The period in which you had the greatest improvement in the lot of the ordinary man was the period of the 19th and early 20th century. Those of us in this room are the heirs of that. We benefited from the way in which our parents and our grandparents were able to come here. And by virtue of the freedom that was offered to them, were able to make a better life for themselves and them and us. But next, if you look at the real problems of poverty and denial of freedom to people in this country, almost every single one of them is a result of government action, and would be eliminated if you eliminated the bad government failures. Let me be precise and specific. Why do we have so high an unemployment rate among black teenagers? It's a disgrace and a scandal. Why do we have so high an unemployment rate? First of all, because we give them lousy schooling through governmental schools, which make them unqualified to hold decent jobs. And second of all, we require employers to discriminate against them by not hiring them unless they have, unless their productivity is enough to justify a minimum wage. The minimum wage rate is the most anti-Negro law in the books. And it's an anti-Negro law because it precisely having first not enabled the young blacks to have a decent schooling so that they can have productivity. We next deny them the on-the-job training that they might get if you can induce employers by being able to hire them for relatively low wages to give them on-the-job training that would make them qualify for higher payment and higher productivity. In the third place, we have constructed a governmental welfare scheme which has been a machine for producing poor people. We have induced people to come under control of welfare. I'm not blaming the people, don't misunderstand me. It's our fault for constructing so perverse and so ill-shaped a monster as the whole set of welfare programs we have under which we encourage people, families to break up. We encourage people to move from one part of the country and come to another.
Now, that is actually true here. So I want to pause here because that's actually still a problem here. So for instance, if you're on Medicaid, you can't have more than $2,000 in assets, not including your family vehicle. But what if one person is working and the other one is not, and together the two of you are earning a sufficient amount of money, but the other person is sicker, right? You're actually incentivizing that couple to get a divorce so that no longer that husband who's working, let's say, that income and those assets are counted with the wife who's, let's say, more sicker and needs the Medicaid coverage, right? And same for, kids, right? So that the whole family structure, the way that the laws are written, especially with needs testing, it actually encourages a family is better off if it breaks up and it's poor than if it stays together and it's poor. Is what and that's still true to this day, by the way.
Under which we have, in effect, made many people poor. And yet, when all this is said and done, have I ever been where? Poor. I have certain, of course, more so than most of the people in this room.
Yeah, he turns out he was actually really shit poor. Ukrainian Jew, New York City, early 1900s. Didn't have enough money to go to school. Ended up getting enough money to go to Rutgers, which was the state school in New Jersey. He was really piss poor, so he wasn't always rich.
How many of you have worked a 12-hour day and gotten paid 78 cents? But let me go back to
the job he did when he did that was USDA. He worked for the Department of Agriculture during the 1930s. So he did have a job though. So like he got really shitty paid, but he did have a job courtesy of the New Deal. So it should be noted, yes, he was poor, but some of that was during the Great Depression when everyone was poor.
all of you know.
He married.
Is there one of you who is going to say that you don't want a doctor to treat you for cancer unless he himself has had cancer?
Rose Friedman.
I could go down the line. But when all is said and done, while there are people in this country who are worse off than other people, by and large, even the poorest people in this country are relatively well off compared to the conditions in many other countries in the world.
Not necessarily.
What we take as our standard of poverty, is above the average income of all of the people in the Soviet Union, let alone of the people in India or China or in other countries. Now that doesn't mean we should be satisfied with it. We are a wealthier country and we've been more productive. And we should set higher standards by ourselves. But by the same token, we ought to have a sense of proportion. And we ought to recognize both the source and the problem.
Okay, I don't need to see him talk about free trade. Anyway, why don't we,
in reference to,
I don't want to hear him talking again. Okay, so what do you want me to do here? I only have about, well, let's take a break now. Let's take a break till the top of the hour, 7 o'clock. I only want to say a few more things, and then we can open it up to anyone who wants to say anything. Or we can just power through it and do it now. What do you want? What do you want? Anyone need a bio break? That's a fancy way that people say this. Okay. The only thing that I wanted to add to this would be, so this builds on the Milton Friedman comment, would be that the way the tax system is set up is that the tax system is the way that we transfer basically income from rich Scheiding household to your piss poor household, right? I mean, that's how the system works, right? I pay more in taxes than I certainly get in benefits. And I'm not complaining, it's the way that the country works, the tax system works, right? Because there was a time when I was taking out more than I was putting into the system, right? Just like health insurance and all the other things, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea of this all. That before taxes and transfers, right? So meaning people getting taxed that are rich, transfers of my tax income to poor people. Before taxes and transfers, almost 1 in 3 people would be at the poverty, would be below poverty in the United States, 1 in 3. But because of our way that we tax people and transfer income to those poor households, again, this is where we're at. And depending on how you define it, and this goes back to Bert's question of like how we actually measure this, but we're anywhere between 16 to 19%. So almost a 10% reduction, courtesy of the tax system and all the programs that that tax system supports, like earned income tax credit, like Social Security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So despite what Friedman and Clark Kent are saying here, it's actually pretty, it is Friedman's right, I mean, on some level. Friedman's right in that you need capitalism to raise the entire boat, right? I mean, it's the only way that you can permanently reduce countrywide poverty. But the way that capitalism works, as we all know, is that the rewards of capitalistic behavior are uneven. And there are going to be incredibly rich individuals and incredibly poor individuals. And that's where you then see, like, I don't know, it was like some stat that came out earlier this week where someone was pitching and moaning about like the 200 richest people have more than half the country, right? Some, difference like that. And it's absolutely true, right? It's absolutely true. The inequality is absolutely there. Like, I don't even hang out with that rich of people, but I know some pretty rich people, and they absolutely look different than I do. And they absolutely have more money than I do. Am I jealous? Yeah, sure, absolutely. But they also seem to have their own issues too. Isn't that guy that's sitting behind him? Doesn't that look like the guy that was that actor in that Social Network movie that played Zuckerberg and was in Superbad?
Eisenberg.
Yeah, Eisenberg. Yeah.
I think he looks more like Dirk Nowitzki.
Oh yeah.
No, you know who he looks like? He looks like Napoleon Dynamite. Napoleon Dynamite. Napoleon Dynamite Clark Kent in Smallville. No, but Friedman's right. I mean, you do need capitalism to get out of this, but the problem is the inequality is incredibly stark in that I can live on the same island as, okay, I'm turning on one set of lights. I can live on the same, I can live on the same island, on one end of the island in Manoa where I live. There's not a lot of poverty around where I live. I mean, I live in a pretty, I don't live in the fanciest suburb in Honolulu, but it's pretty nice. I mean, Manoa is pretty nice, right? And it's far and away much better than communities on the leeward side, right? And yeah, we all live in the capitalist system, and we could even say what Friedman's saying here, that even being poor on the leeward coast is certainly better than being poor in
The Congo.
the Congo, yeah, sure, Syria, but dude, poor still sucks. Being poor sucks. So yeah, that's how I prepared for poverty. I mean, again, I'm not really doing. If you're a conservative, I'm not really doing a good justification for why we shouldn't have it programs, but I think the Friedman. Really all conservatives that have come after Friedman, and so he's given this talk in the late 70s from the looks of it. Most Republicans today just basically are inspired by these comments that we need to get the government out of things to get people richer. That might seem antithetical to us, but we need to get rid of the minimum wage so that people can have jobs. We need to get the government out of educational systems so that instead of teaching people how to do math, we can teach them how to be a welder. There's probably something to be said, right? Not every college student should go to college, and I certainly have seen that in my life, right? And they should be a welder, and their parents shouldn't have bothered them to get a business degree because they have no business in business. They should have been a welder, right? Which is a perfectly honorable profession. Yeah. But yeah, or a plumber or a carpenter. My grandfather was a carpenter, right? I mean, it's a union job, right? I mean, dude, you live a good life, dude.
They're normally pretty loaded, but they don't look it.
Yeah, exactly. They don't look it.
But they're loaded.
But they're generally loaded, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of, we think of careers, there's a lot of really good careers out there. And again, this is not my solution to poverty. I'm not saying that at all, because I don't think it's usually not an issue of poor people just need to work harder. Because you can work really, really hard and still be really, really poor. As we just saw, 40 hours a week, no breaks. That's if you get to 40, right? I mean, that's a whole different issue, right? Walmart's not going to give you the 40 unless you've been there long enough. Starbucks isn't even going to give you the 40 because they don't want to give you health insurance, right? So you're typically not going to get the 40, most jobs. Substitute teachers, what do you get as a substitute teacher? Do you know, Frank, because you worked for DOE for a while, right, or no?
Sometimes they call me for sub.
How much is the stuff pay?
As an educational assistant?
Yeah.
I think it's around
$14 an hour?
maybe a little bit, just a little bit more.
But certainly not dependable, right? It's not like you could do it every day.
No.
Yeah. So, right, so I mean, even the quick things that we think of where people can get out of poverty, they don't exist. So, dude, it's a rough world out there. But yeah, that's my only comments. Now you can add whatever you want to all this discussion.
I mean, my comment about the capitalism
Mhm.
and all of that is is if you have wealthy people that continue to hoard the wealth and they get actually more and more rich compared to the rest of society,
Mhm.
it's like that's actually gonna break down the capitalism in the
Mhm.
future because it's like the new people coming up or like young people coming up, they're not gonna have the money to be consumers.
Mhm.
So it's like, I mean, this is like one reason why we shouldn't have this just free for all, make, let the rich people have as much as they can. And
Mhm.
did you do any research in terms of how's the inequality going in the other direction in terms of how the rich people are getting?
Yes, so the only research I did right before this class was I was actually curious about it was not picking on Trump, but I did look at the Trump tax cuts. Obviously, it's pretty well known that for the most part, they help the Scheidings of the world, right? I mean, I'm not going to be paying as much in taxes, but I don't create jobs, right? I mean, and even if I could, even if I was in that ultra wealthy class where I could be creating jobs, I still wouldn't be creating jobs. But that was the philosophy behind Trump tax cuts is largely Friedman-esque, and I don't think Trump is qualified enough to use this kind of inspiration. But the people he surrounds himself with were all informed by, inspired by Friedman, which is the whole idea again. The inequality, to kind of get to your question, the degree of inequality in the United States right now is the highest it has ever been. So back in this, so a quick way to see the inequality is how many workers does it take to equal the salary of the CEO? That's kind of a quick way that people do it, right? The bottom of the organization versus the top of the organization. And back in the 1970s, the average CEO earned about 22 times what the average worker on average back in the 1970s. And that today it's something like, was it like 315 employees now on average, that the average CEO earns 315 times what the average workers are. So as measured as inequality in that kind of way, right? How do you become CEO? It's not even that you're necessarily the smartest, right? It could be that you're just the son of the CEO that was before you, or you're the CEO because you knew this guy from college, right? And he was the CFO. He made you, right? I know I do know a few CEOs. I haven't met a very smart CEO yet. They're usually the pizzazz of the company, right? They're the ones that will shake your hands and steal your watch, right? I mean, that's what a CEO does. I mean, they're not going to know the numbers. They're going to know strategies. They're going to use words like synergistic, and they're going to be out the door, right? So why are they earning? I mean, why does it exist that way? Just like poverty is contagious, the wealth is contagious as well, right? Usually rich people are rich because their family was rich and the other family members are rich, right? And we talk about the stories, like that guy that sells the My Pillow, you know that guy, that crazy guy, the My Pillow?
Oh, I see the advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that guy is like the one rare story. So the guy was like addicted to like crack, cocaine, and like heroin, drinker. Then he found God. Then that's why he wears that like big cross. He found God. Yeah, the My Pillow guy. And then he spent like 15 years designing the perfect pillow, designed it, and then just started selling it. So now he's gone from like piss poor to really rich. But those kinds of examples are incredibly rare, right? Where someone like has an idea, like American dream style that we think of. It's pretty rare.
Whatever happened to that Shyamalan guy?
He died, I think. Yeah.
No, that was OxyClean.
No, that was OxyClean.
Oh.
Yeah.
Shyamalan has
The one I brought.
Oh, was he the guy that looked like he was always high on
Yeah,
something.
right.
Yeah. And his hair was like up in the sky, yeah. Yeah, it's the ShamWow guy, yeah. No, yeah, you're right, the OxyClean guy's dead, the guy that always wore that, like, plant, yeah, he had that black hair.
He died right after he won that bet with the other person he was competing with against.
And now they have that, like, British guy who took over his job, right?
There's another, they had a competition who could sell more of their product.
Yeah.
And the day he won was the day he had a heart attack.
Oh, man. It's like
Oh,
that
he was
Alanis
arrested
Morissette
for
song.
Battery with a 26-year-old sex worker. Yep.
Who did what?
He committed battery against a 26-year-old sex worker.
And what happened to him?
Oh, they didn't. Oh, they declined to file formal charges against either person.
So what happened? So then he just lost his job?
No, I think he's still active.
ShamWow guy.
Apparently.
ShamWow guy. Yeah. Oh, he looks rough.
Yeah, man.
Oh, he's also the slap chop guy. That's right. Remember the slap chop?
Yeah.
6'3", damn. Oh, hey, but the popular notion was.
This ShamWow guy died.
Wait. Oh, that's Billy Mays. That's Billy Mays. So, Dan, this might get a little bit to your question here, but right, I mean, this is 2013, but this gives you a pretty good idea. Right, the rich keep getting richer, and the poor are pretty much stuck in the middle. And the problem, here's the problem. So why does it look like this? The one popular, why, let me ask it to you this way. Why did the Trump Tax Act get passed despite this picture looking like this? Why did the tax law get passed in 2017 that is really shitty for poor people? Despite the fact that poor people, 50% of the country have jack shit for wealth. And yet they passed, and that we passed as a country, we passed, our legislators, our representatives, passed a law that allows me to deduct my, that makes my dividends be taxed at a lower rate, my capital gains are taxed at a lower rate. And dude, that's a big chunk of my income, dividends and capital gains, right? Lots of assets, driving, right, earning money for me, not, hourly income is obviously important to me as well, but the Trump tax cut makes my capital gains and dividends be taxed at a much lower rate than your income for working. So why did that law get passed? Yeah, bro, what do you think, dude?
I thought it was because, I guess, the rich fought for it.
Well, that's part of it, right? So rich people, not myself, I don't care. But part of it is absolutely rich people hire lobbyists, right? Rich groups hire lobbyists, and they talk to their congressmen and say, this is very important for jobs in our community. If I don't get this tax cut, I'm not going to be able to expand my company, and that's going to cost you a lot of jobs, right, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah.
Is it in theory that if you don't tax the rich as much, they'll spend more money, thus helping the economy? Trickle down.
Exactly. That could be the other part of it too, right? Is that lower tax? So this is the popular notion that's given would be, this is what Trump would say would be, if people get taxed less, then they just spend more money in general, and that helps the whole economy. What else?
Are you looking for a political answer?
It's a little bit more philosophical, I guess, or social. That's a social analyst. What do we love about the United
Probably
States?
because everybody thinks they're going to be rich.
Exactly.
Bacon.
Exactly. We all think we're going to be rich, and why would we want to screw ourselves over, right? And so the problem, maybe it's less this group because things are really bad, but it could be this group, right? Which are kind of the people I know. I did once meet the 134th richest person in the world, and he's a real mean guy. He has $11.1 billion. I don't know where that puts. It's got to put him. I mean, if he's the 134th richest person in the world, I think he's in the top 10%. He's a really mean guy. Like he's so mean.
1% for sure.
Huh?
That's top 1 or top 0.1 or something like that.
Yeah, he's a really mean guy. It was a big dinner, and he was sitting one table over from me, but he was a real mean guy. Let's see. But yeah, not exactly what Dan said here. The big idea for why people keep getting screwed over is that people think that someday they will become rich, and the net result of that is that we believe the hype, right? So then the hype is that it's not Trump's fault. Trump's just a product of a larger political system we all live in, where we are told that the average American is going to get, X number of dollars more a month. But as I was just looking at before class, which goes back to Dan's point from before, would be tax receipts for 2019. Are down. They're down. This wasn't the article I read, but it's basically the same article. Basically, when the Trump tax cuts were passed, there were estimates obviously made of what the revenue was going to be. We thought that we were going to have an $11 billion deficit this month, and it turns out that there was a $14 billion this month, that month of December. And the reason why is because less money is coming in. And the biggest reason why would be corporations are paying less taxes, which is exactly what the Trump tax cuts did. They drastically cut the corporate tax rates, dramatically so. So when we think of, does anyone remember the politician Herman Cain?
Yeah, flat tax.
Exactly. What was his campaign? First, what was he known for? Godfather's Pizza. Oh man, you want some shitty pizza? The shittiest pizza I ever had was on the mainland. It was called Rocky Rococo. Has anyone ever eaten at Rocky Rococo?
No.
It's like this Guido-looking guy that looks like Weekend at Bernie's. Just imagine, this is like really bad pizza. But her Godfather Pizza is also really bad pizza. But the reason why this guy is important is because he was running for president, and he had an idea. His idea was he wanted to simplify the tax code so that it was what was called a 999 plan. There would be an excise tax, a corporate tax, and a sales tax, or personal income tax, excise tax, and business tax. So everyone would basically, we would pay a 9% income tax and 9% excise tax, and corporations would pay 9% tax. Sounds really simple, but think about corporations. For corporations, that cuts their tax rate down to 9%. They're no longer have to pay taxes on most things. Dude, I'd be really happy about it. I'd save quite a bit of money from this. A 9% tax? I mean, think about it. Someone in my age group is typically in the 25% tax bracket, 28% tax bracket. If times are really good, maybe the 32% tax bracket. I'm going to have to pay 9% or at most 18%. I'm going to save a lot of money, right? For me, dude, that's going to make me happy. For rich people, that's going to make them happy. Poor people, that's going to royally suck because what's their income tax bracket? 0 or maybe 10% at most, right? Maybe 15. But even at 15, they're certainly not a poverty line anymore. But they're going to be paying 18% of this. Excise taxes, we all sadly know here in Hawaii, applies more broadly than the sales tax, right? We have to pay an excise tax on going to the doctor, going to the dentist. On the mainland, you don't pay a sales tax on going to the dentist.
Really?
We pay excise taxes on going to the dentist here in Hawaii. Yeah. Well, let's just look at who's in favor of it. Arthur Lather, oh my God, that guy, if you ever meet that guy is a thief. If you go to dinner with him, he will stick you with the bill. I think he's dead. Oh no, he's alive. I think he's alive. Yeah. Oh my God, not to be trusted.
Oh, is he a friggin' snake?
And think about it, he's 78, so he's obviously had some work done.
Or he's like so evil where he doesn't hate.
His good friend. Anyone want to name who his good friend was? Nixon. Nope, Nixon was his good friend.
Are you freaking serious?
So, nothing against the guy, but he's pretty sneaky. Yeah, and he came up with this idea called the Laffer curve. He went to a bar in Chicago. He was in Chicago. He went to a bar in Chicago, and he basically had this idea that Reagan used in 1986 during the Reagan tax cuts in 1986 was that you were going to reduce the tax levels and that people were going to work harder because they're being taxed less. So he had this backward bending curve. Let's see if let me just show it to you here instead of trying to explain it. There's got to be a picture of it somewhere. Yeah. Seen another way, is that you can there's such a thing as making the tax rate so high that tax revenue falls. So the whole idea, this is a good picture to even look at here, just as a very long-winded way of kind of even answering both of these sorts of questions is, when we as Republicans and Democrats debate tax code, usually the debate is, are we here or are we here? Like, which side of the hump are we on? That's really usually what the debate is about. Republicans, by default, think that we're here, right? And the idea is that we need to reduce the tax cuts or reduce the tax rate to raise the revenue. And Democrats, generally speaking, think that we're over here. And so by reducing the tax rate, you actually lower tax revenue. I don't know. I mean,
Do you know where we are on that thing?
well, the evidence certainly seems to indicate that we're over here. Yeah, and then this Trabant and Ulig, yeah, this is a pretty famous article. Most people think that it is around 70%, and that's clearly not what we're taxing people at. So, but dude, how many people have read the Trabant and Ulig Act or paper, right? I mean, not most people. Right, so some politician comes up, says, dude, people aren't working hard because your taxes are too high. Wouldn't you work harder if your taxes were lower? We all think, yeah, golly, gee, I sure would. But it turns out that we're nowhere near that. We're actually, that's why this is highlighted here. The most rich person, right, the 134th richest person, Don Menard, he pays about the 39% tax bracket. Yeah, so it's about right there. Right around where that 35% is. So that Wall Street Journal article is entirely unsurprising to anyone but the brain dead, or Arthur Laffer. Well, no, actually Laffer probably knows what's going on too. But it's unfortunate though, because, and I'm not blaming Republicans, because Democrats are just as guilty of it in other ways. Right, this Green New Deal is probably just one example of how they're guilty of massaging the data. I mean, they're clearly wrong on this. The Trump tax cut can't possibly grow tax revenue. There's no economic theory that would suggest that we're anywhere near the 70% tax bracket. No one's paying 70% taxes on a marginal rate in the United States today. It's just not happening. So, I mean, same with the Green New Deal, right? Green New Deal, same problem, except now building a train track across the country isn't going to stimulate the economy, just like cutting taxes.
Well, they would need to pair it with the tax increase in taxes. That's why they're talking about like 70% taxes. It's like, that's one thing I learned like in another class is that we used to have like 70 to 80,
90%. So 1959
level income tax rates.
Yep, during the end of the Eisenhower administration, so that was, we just had fought the Koreans, and we're getting ready to fight the Vietnamese. 90% tax bracket was the highest tax bracket in the United States. It was a time though when there were lots of deductions and you could get out of paying as much, but still the highest tax bracket was 90%. and during the Kennedy administration, it subsequently was decreased.
Goes to like 80, 70.
Yep. But also, curiously enough, it's good that you bring it up, because as you may remember here, it was 1959 when the poverty rate actually started to decline in the United States. So there's some kind of, at least there's a correlation, maybe not causation, between reducing the tax rates and reducing poverty. But that would be because obviously we needed more tax revenue. Obviously, we're well beyond 70% for the highest rates. Yeah.
And then, I mean, like when you show that graph of like the wealth disparity, or like
Yeah.
how it's changed, it's like, oh, it makes perfect sense. It's like when they started reducing the tax rates in the 80s, that's when the disparity got bigger and like the rich got richer.
So let's look at this one though here, and there was a picture I saw here, which, okay, I'm gonna click on images, could be offensive. Never know. Hey, there was that one week where we were doing pimps and stuff, and it was just as bad. But so look at that, right? I mean, we're actually getting to a point where those in poverty, I mean, look at this. I mean, it is no different. It's the same. And when we look at the number of people in poverty, right? I mean, look at that. The number of people in poverty is really, really high. And we're coming off a time where the past 10 years have been the most fantastic economically. And dude, the music's going to stop at some point. So, I mean, I don't know what to, I mean, I'm not saying like we need to be doomsday preppers here, but at the same time, this will obviously go up during the next recession, and we have the additional problem, added problem now that we don't have the monetary policy tools to get out of the next recession, because we don't. Well, let's see. Hey, Dylan, what kind of monetary policy would I use? What's the most common way that I would get out of a recession from a monetary policy perspective? Exactly, changing the federal funds rate, right? Let's look at what it is right now. Usually when I want to find something like this, just so you know, I usually like to go to Markets Data Center. It keeps a pretty good track of where things are here. So prime rates are generally pretty close to this, but if we look at the federal funds rate right now, it's about, so federal funds rate would mean what is the Federal Reserve paying for existing government securities? What interest rate are they paying for existing government securities? So about 2.43%, give or take. That doesn't give us a lot of movement here. Before the collapse of the financial crisis, the federal funds rate was nearly 7%, and it was dropped to 0 in a few short months, basically. And we're already pretty darn close to 0. So it's no fault, in this case, it's no fault of Jones here, but his answer is actually incorrect, although it's technically correct. The federal funds rate is the primary way in a traditional world that we stimulate an economy. But the way we actually do it now, the primary way the Federal Reserve stimulates the US economy is by the interest rate it pays on deposits that depository institutions, banks, hold at the Federal Reserve. So just like we put money into a bank and get interest, the primary way the Federal Reserve is pumping money into the economy is by paying interest on excess money that banks are holding. Probably says we have too much money, right? I mean, that's the other way of looking at it, right? Is that banks have so much crazy amount of money that they're sitting on that they don't even need to, that they're not even lending it out. And the Federal Reserve is stimulating the economy that way. What's called the overnight repurchase agreements. Overnight repurchase agreements. Right, exactly. The London interbank overnight rate. That's the primary way that the Federal Reserve is basically paying that interest rate to banks, holding money there and stimulating the economy. Yeah, dude, I mean, that's a horrible way to stimulate the economy. It's basically a last stop to bad things happening. I really hope we have a recession during this class, because that will make our discussions really interesting.
I need a, I want a
You're not
job.
gonna be here.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you'll all be gone, but I'll still get paid. I'll still get paid.
No one's gonna buy stickers in a recession.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no one's gonna buy stickers. Yeah, or maybe they will buy a bunch. They'll have to plan like job interviews. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna have to live on that farm there. No, so that's. I mean, hopefully I've kind of, and I do want to be done here. That's pretty much my. It was a bit on a high horse today, and so I'll apologize for that. But it's hard to talk about poverty and inequality without sounding a little bit opinionated. And how do we get out of it, dude? I don't know. I mean, I obviously don't have the solution to it. I wish I did. I could probably make a lot of money. No, but I mean, I really don't know. I mean, I do. I mean, there are things I believe. I kind of believe like Friedman. Dude, capitalism is pretty great. For anyone that's lived or been to a country where there is not capitalism, it generally pretty much sucks, unless you know the right person and you were generally born into that position. So if we believe in things like equality, I mean, the American dream, as shitty as that metaphor is, dude, it still exists to some extent, right? And hard work isn't going to be a guarantee of prosperity, but it's the best we've got, right? I mean, it really is it's a good somewhat solution. After capitalism, you know, Friedman's kind of understanding that capitalism is great. I'm not sure it's that great, but it's good. I don't know what the solution is. Minimum income, Green New Deal. Right? I mean, think about the way that the government has failed you. Right? I mean, you were promised that you go to college and you're going to get a fantastic job. Well, except for the accountants, right? I mean, it's hit or miss, right? I mean, and even then, right?
You did good, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, accountants can do good, but right? But I mean, at the same time, right? I mean, but think about people who have like a business degree or a even economics degree. That's even like the more lucrative degrees, right? I mean, think about like English literature, philosophy, political science, anthropology, history, creative media, right? I mean, I don't know where the jobs are on that, right? Where's the income? But there's a lot of student loans being taken out to finance people getting those degrees, right? And so you're being kind of fucked over because, as we looked at on that chart, that's what's driving. I don't even have it there anymore, right? But that is what's driving ballooning poverty, student loan payments that you might not be able to pay off. So, with that bright view of the world, you are free to do what you want. We'll have what? Yeah, I don't know. No, you know, I actually have been having a good day today, so it's not like I should be necessarily pessimistic, but I am, again, generally speaking, a pessimist, as most economists. Most economists are pessimistic people, so.
Pessimism and realism are